Hey, church, we are going to look one more time at one of Jesus' obscure parables. This one comes again from Matthew chapter 13. It's from verses 31 and 32, where Jesus says this. Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed which a man took and planted in his field. Though it is the smallest of all seeds, yet when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds come and perch in its branches. Now, I'm sure you've heard this parable before. The sort of easy explanation is about how the kingdom of God is like something that's really small, and something that you would not expect to become a big and powerful force, and yet it does. And that's essentially what the parable is all about. However, there are some different ways other people have interpreted the parable. And so I just want to look really quickly at a few of those interpretations and a few of the problems that people have raised with this parable as well. The first explanation that, again, similar to when we looked at earlier, the parable that's paired with this, the parable of the woman who mixes yeast into the dough. Some people translate this or understand this as being a parable about negative influences in the church. That the church is like this field, but then this thing grows up in the middle of it that shouldn't be there. And the reason why people understand it this way is the allusion to the birds coming and resting in its branches. If you look earlier in the chapter, at the beginning of Matthew chapter 13, Jesus again tells the parable of the farmer who spreads the seed, and it falls on different types of soil. And one of those seeds starts to grow up, and it says the birds of the air come and they snatch it away. And this is sort of one of the negative things, that as maybe someone hears the gospel and they start to respond, but then the worries and cares of this life, or the enemy comes and snatches any sort of growth before it can even happen. And so some people have interpreted this little parable as saying that this is actually demonstrating something that's negative, but I don't really think that's the case, and here's why. This illustration about a plant that grows into this mighty tree so big that birds can perch and find rest and shade is an allusion to an Old Testament passage from Daniel chapter 4, verse 12. In that passage, a king, Nebuchadnezzar, has this dream or this vision regarding himself, that he is actually this tree that springs up from the ground, and he's sort of bigger and stronger than any of the other trees that are out there. And he's so big and amazing that he produces fruit, and animals come and they find shelter under the shade of the tree, and birds come and they build nests and find a home on the branches of the tree. It's basically talking about the splendor and power that a king has. Now, in that context, this tree essentially gets chopped down because it's too proud. But the picture carries over, that the kingdom is just like this illusion from Daniel chapter 4. That's something that starts small but blooms quickly and becomes this force that's big and powerful and unexpected, and majestic, so majestic that even birds can come and find rest and shade and be able to build nests. Now, that's what I think the parable is about, the growth, the unforeseen growth of the kingdom, which is small and often overseen or ignored, and yet breaks forth from the soil and has this powerful and lasting effect on that which is around it. However, there are a few problems that people have brought up in this parable, and one of them is that mustard seeds are not the smallest of all seeds, as Jesus claims. this is obviously a thing that people talk about. That was Jesus wrong? Did he not know? If he's God, how could he possibly not know that the mustard seed is not the smallest seed? In fact, the smallest seed that we have sort of recorded in nature comes from the orchid flower. That seed is so small that you need a microscope to see it, and so that is sort of what is widely known as the smallest of all seeds. Yet, that's not really what Jesus' point was. Because if Jesus said, look, the orchid seed is the smallest of all seeds, his audience would be like, what are you talking about? What's an orchid? And how do you even know what an orchid seed is? We've never seen one, because orchids were not native to Israel, and nor would they have microscopes to be able to even see that orchids would have seeds. So it would have made no sense whatsoever. So Jesus is simply using the picture and the language of what that would be familiar to them. So mustard plants grow all throughout Israel, and mustard seeds are quite small. They're tiny, tinier than sort of a full stop at the end of a sentence on a word processing program on our computers. It's really tiny, and that seed would have been really well known in the ancient world and to Jesus' audience. And so even though it's not the smallest of all seeds in the whole world, it would have been the smallest seed that Jesus' audience would have known and understood. And that's kind of the point. Even though orchid seeds are actually technically smaller, the picture, the parable still holds. The other problem that people have with this parable is that mustard seeds don't tend to grow up into trees. They can. It's possible. There are such things as mustard trees that are found throughout the highlands of places of Israel even today. But typically, mustard seeds grow into bushes, bushes that don't that are made up of vines mainly and wouldn't have branches. Certainly not strong enough for birds to build a nest on, and some of which birds wouldn't even be able to land on because they're not very strong. And so some people have pointed out that Jesus is sort of wrong here, talking about a mustard seed. Sure, there is the possibility that mustard seeds can grow into trees. In very small cases that happens. But Jesus clearly doesn't understand agriculture, that mustard seeds grow into mustard sort of bushes. And mustard bushes are certainly not strong enough to hold birds. Again, this is sort of the point of the way Jesus tells his parables. Jesus always includes elements of surprise and unexpectedness. And so, the point is for Jesus that his audience would be well aware that most mustard seeds grow into bushes and not trees. But the image, again, still holds that this little mustard seed, which is tiny and you wouldn't expect anything from, can, because it is a symbol of the kingdom, grows into something beyond our expectations, bigger and stronger and more powerful and amazing than we could even imagine. Most of us would just imagine a mustard seed would grow into a bush, but that's not how the kingdom works. It grows into a massive tree so that the birds of the air can find shelter and shade. And that is what this parable is all about. That in God's kingdom, it starts small, it's unexpected, you wouldn't expect anything from it, and yet, as it grows, you see God's kingdom expanding into something that is bigger and more beautiful and more powerful than we could possibly imagine.